Welcome. I'm Catherine Magana here with Rachel Ivanovich, and welcome to our Savvy series. Today we're going to discuss luxury or liability, the truth about vacation homes in retirement. So here we are, it's summertime and there's summer vacations, and vacation homes are starting to call some people. And I've actually been one of those people. Every year we go up to Big Bear, and usually it used to be winter, then spring, but recently, the last few years, it's been summertime. And it's interesting, every time we go up there, we have such an amazing time. We're up there for a week, and then all of a sudden we're looking at, what are the home prices? And what if we bought this?
Just wait. Yeah. In a minute, you're going to have a home in Italy.
I know. Right? And so it's just one of those things that you have, then you think, should we do this, or what does this look like? And
every place Cole and I visit, we're like, what's the median price of homes here? Let's go look at homes.
But then what holds you back too is that we have kids that are 16 and they're really active in sports, and we barely, all the weekends are full, and it's like, are we really gonna go? But it's definitely something to think about. And as we're dealing with some of our clients and helping them plan, and those that are retired, there are occasions that these types of conversations come up. So we thought we'd kind of dig into this.
And if
today.
this does apply to you and you're thinking about getting a second home, then give us a call.
Yes.
760-692-5700. We'd love to hear from you.
Exactly. Okay, so the main thing that kind of comes to mind is kind of that emotional lure to having that second home.
The home by the lake, sit on the dock.
And then you think like, you think of all the memories, and or if you've gone in the past, or you're thinking of the memories you'll create. And so it's one of those kind of pressures, like, if you know somebody that's doing it, and you're thinking, I want to do this. It would
be way better if you just have a friend who has a second home. Just saying.
I know. Like, wait a minute. And so we're not saying, if you decide to do this, obviously there's the financial planning and seeing what's the impact to your financial plan. But I think sometimes there's a little bit more to it than the warm and fuzzy feelings about it. There's more of the financial.
I actually had a client come in just the other day who was talking about getting a home in Arizona because they're not really ready to retire 100%, but they want that second home where they can go out and all the activities will be there. They can play pickleball. There'll be the pool. There's the golf and so on. And they want the all-in-one. Yeah. But then once we started putting the numbers together, we had to look at some other scenarios. Yeah.
And then it's like, do you really want to live there in the summertime? Just kidding.
Right. Do you like 120 degrees?
Right. And so I guess some of the things you have to think about are the cost. So if there's maintenance, HOAs, fees, the travel costs if you're going to travel to the location,
insurance.
Utilities, insurance.
And insurance is hard to get in certain areas.
Yeah. And property management fees if you're going to pay a property manager to help you. And so the other thing to consider is, how many times are you going to visit? Is this just like a one-time thing you like, or are you going to consistently
So that
go?
actually kind of leads into the tax implications of having a second home, which a lot of people want to know when they call my office. So you need to keep in mind, is this going to be, so the IRS specifically has a guideline for what is considered personal use. Mm-hmm. So personal use is if you use the home for 14 days or less, that's not considered any personal use. Okay. Or 10% of the days that you rent the property. Mm-hmm. So maybe you want to buy a second home, but you're also going to rent it to help offset the costs. Mm-hmm. So an example would be, let's just say that you do the short-term rental situation like a Airbnb or a Vrbo, and you rent the home for 200 days during the year. So you could then use it for 14 days or 20 days, whatever's more in that situation, because you've rented it for 200, 10% of that would be 20 days. Mm-hmm. So if you do that, then it's not considered personal use, because once you cross over from just it being a rental property into personal use, then you have to start allocating expenses, and there's certain things that you can't deduct. So it gets really tricky. And I've had people say, well, what if let's say I'm going to rent it for 2 weeks in August, 3 in December, 1 in November, 2 weeks in March, spring break, 2 weeks in May, 2 weeks in June, and 2 weeks in July. And that sounds like a lot of rental use, but that's only 98 days. So then you're back to that 14-day limitation. So you definitely want to work with your tax advisor to find out what do the taxes look like, because with a personal property, you have a lot of limitations with property taxes and mortgage interest. And so what that looks like under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was passed in 2017, is you can only deduct up to $10,000 of your property taxes. Okay. So that's on a first and a second home. Mm-hmm. So you're capped at that $10,000 limit if you use the house for more than that limitation, that 14 days or the 10% of days rented. The other thing that's limited is mortgage interest, because under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is you can only have loans up to $750,000 and deduct the interest. So if you've got a home that has, let's say, a $300,000 loan and one that has a $500,000 loan, all of a sudden you're losing a chunk of your deduction. Whereas if it's a rental property, you can deduct all of the mortgage interest and all of the property taxes. But you may have to allocate based on personal use.
So basically, you're kind of talking about then vacation versus Airbnb, or and there's some that may have rental properties, and that's a whole
other situation. But what happens oftentimes with a second home is that people think, oh, I want to offset some of the costs, and I'm going to rent it out for a certain number of days.
So you have to be very careful.
You have to be, and if you rent it for less than 14 days a year, guess what? You don't have to report the rental income.
Interesting. Okay.
So that could be a win-win.
Yeah. So I guess some things to think about is if you end up getting a vacation home and you do rent it out, then are you doing that? Are you hiring somebody? And then
because property managers can be up to 10% of the rental income that you're collecting.
And then also, what about, do you want to go at the peak times, or are you going to rent it out during the peak times? And so, I think that, and then maybe you don't even want somebody in the home, and now you just have this property that's sitting there, and then you have to think about the maintenance costs.
And who's taking care of it when you're not there, if it's out of state?
Yeah. Or in what area? I mean, there's certain things, is it in a, coastal area? Is it up in the mountains? I mean, there's certain wear and tear that's involved. So I think there's a little bit more to it. But if you do end up going down the path of getting a vacation home, there's also the down payments, and then the mortgage is obviously looking at what the costs are, and then if you have that expense. So if you didn't buy the vacation home right out, and you now have that expense, you have to factor that in, and then do you have the rental income or do you not? And so
or do you have the reserve to take care of the property?
Yeah, because I know there's always something. There's like a roof or plumbing, or there's
absolutely. And do you have somebody in town that what if a pipe bursts or a tree falls on the house? Who's going to take care of it when you're not in town?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to consider.
There's definitely this nostalgia, but there's also the reality.
Yes, and then you have to think about kind of the estate planning part of it. So is this something that you want your kids to have, or who's going to get the property if something happens to you? And I know that we actually have some clients that they're currently part of an estate in trust where they get to go, visit and vacation on properties, which is nice, a nice benefit to have, and those properties are now paid off.
Well, and something that's nice about that when you circle back around to taxes with second homes is let's say you buy the house in your 50s before you've retired, and you use it with your kids. You go for summers and so on, and you buy it for $300,000, and then later when you pass away, then let's just say it's worth $1 million. Your heirs will inherit that, and they will not have to pay any taxes on it if they turn around and sell it, because it does get the step up in basis. Nice. So if they sold it for $1 million, guess what? They get to keep the $1 million and not pay any taxes.
There you go. And then now it seems like real estate prices are pretty high. We've had a pretty big run up. So we haven't seen a correction or a big pullback, but are also where exactly are you buying? But if you are here locally, prices are definitely expensive. And then you have, like you talked about the property taxes, you have to factor in potential of state taxes.
Absolutely.
And then once again, if you don't rent it out and you're expecting to rent it out, being able to cover those expenses. So we had a client that lives in the Midwest, and they had just, were looking at a vacation home. And so we looked at their plan and said, okay, what is the impact? And if they decide to, do this, well, what they realized was after kind of going through that exercise is they weren't really sure if they wanted to go to that kind of one place, because they live and it gets cold in the winters, and they wanted to go for a couple months in the winter time. So they decided not to do that. They decided they want to travel to different areas. And so, it's really kind of case by case and preference. And, it's not only the financial commitment, but it's also what are the plans? And if you're making those commitments, it's.
And I've had several clients that are talking about they're approaching retirement age and are thinking about, do I want to move out of state later? Should I buy a second home now? And what I've talked with them about is, maybe don't sell your primary residence and leave and move and commit to a new state without actually trying it out first. Yeah. So maybe you buy that second home in a place where you think you might want to retire, and you could either rent it out, or you could move there and live there and rent out your primary residence as a kind of an interim situation, because they're kind of between two homes, and you mentioned, the weather's not great, so maybe they want to come back when it's summer.
Yeah.
But you do have to consider the tax implication of having a first and second home and maybe living in between them, in that, okay, well, if I move out of state, to the new state where I maybe want to retire, but I'm not quite ready to go there yet, I can rent out my primary residence
that's another thing.
for 3 years and still have the benefit of the Section 121 exclusion, which is the $250,000 exclusion per spouse. So basically, once you move out of that house, the time clock starts ticking, and you can say, you know what, I'm not going to commit to selling the home that was my primary residence, but I want to preserve that tax benefit. But I have to make my decision: am I committing to this other home or not within 3 years? So,
well, I think it's test driving. It's just making sure.
I love that idea.
It's just one of those things, making sure this is what I want. And the idea sometimes,
because I've had a lot of clients that have buyer's remorse.
Yes.
They move, from, let's just say, Southern California out to Pennsylvania, and then they get there after one winter and say,
I don't want this.
I please want to come home?
Yes.
But if they've sold their home, then they can't buy back into the market. And so renting for a while and then moving and renting might make sense. But.
So as you're kind of listening to this, and if you're thinking of a vacation home, give us a call. We'd love to kind of run the numbers and kind of talk through this with you. And once again, although there's some pros and cons, and every situation's different, and the values and where and the location, but it is important to look at your specific situation to see what the impact is.
And are there criteria of when it actually makes sense to buy one? I mean, should you max out your retirement plan first?
I think it's looking at, do you...
The full financial
so if we're looking at if you want to buy a vacation home in retirement, do you already own, is your home paid off?
Right.
Is it, what are your cash needs? And then, we actually had another client that had a place here locally, and then they were looking at buying another place. They go vacation in Palm Springs, and they're thinking of buying a place out there. Right. But while they're out there, they're renting the house here. So it's just, but everyone's different. No, some people maybe don't want that, but they're like, well, we can get, because of this area is desirable.
Because we did talk about a lot of cons of having the second home.
So but there are some pros.
What are the pros? I mean, if it's part of the lifestyle vision and within your income plan.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of, okay, you have to have a plan.
Yes, exactly. So if you'd like to have a conversation with us, you can reach us at 760-692-5700. And that concludes today. We do appreciate you getting savvy with us today about your finances. And until next time, savvy up. Please stay tuned for important disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results, and the indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Savvy Woman Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.